Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Strong Inside and Out, the place where you always get that nugget of information that helps you be a strong woman on the inside and out. And this week we are recording and releasing the final episode in our series of Building a Life That You Love. And I'm excited for this one because I'm all about self-care. I have to say, hasn't always been that way. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you go back to the history of my channel and my episodes, you definitely will hear me talk a lot about how I was able to get self-care to become a priority for myself. And so I'm excited to talk about it a little bit more this week with you. Before we get started, lots of really great things going on. It's very ironic that I'm recording this on Sunday, March 2nd, and I just received the email that said, get ready because in a couple of days, the TED Talks will be released and it's going out there to the world. So, whether I'm ready or not, no, just kidding. I am very, very ready for that. Looking forward to that. Also, this week, I had a few job prospect things come up and I feel good about those. So moving in the right direction there. And then in addition to that, I took the next big step designing my alternative certification program for teachers and I started making the application handbook. So excited. A lot of work, a lot of legal work as well, but very, very much needed. So, having said all that, I have one more week until it's spring break, and I know I'm going to make it because I'm strong on the inside and out. But more importantly, because I have to, right? Sometimes we don't have a choice and we have to keep moving forward. This is a tough time of the year. So, if you're out there feeling it, make sure to give yourself a little extra care this week, especially before having your kids home for spring break or having schedules change or just dealing with the transition from winter to spring on Sunday next week. I know we change our clocks back and that's always a rough time as well to get used to that. Very much needed, but a little bit of a challenge. So take care of you. All right, let's get diving into self-care. So if you've gone back and listened to my history, I have to say that I've always been somebody who believed that we needed to be healthy. I grew up in a home, and I've shared this before, with a lot of drug and alcohol abuse and body image issues and just a lot going on. And if I think back to the time where I was a child in the 70s and 80s, and I know it's gotten a bit better now. I don't want to say it's perfect because it definitely is not, but there was this image, right, that women were supposed to have. Women should be the housewives, women should be perfect, women should be catering to their husbands, women should be the perfect size. And I know my mom told me stories, and I'm not sure if I've shared this with you before, but she was kicked out of school a few different times because she wanted to wear her skirt shorter than what was expected, or she wanted to wear pants instead of a skirt or a dress. And I even remember as a child, my mom would say to me often, because I don't like dresses, I've never liked dresses or skirts. I'll wear them sometimes, but they're not my favorite. And I wanted to wear pants. And my mom was like, no, little girls wear dresses. So there's been this image, right, of women. And my mom fell into that comparison trap. She was short. She was barely 4'11", and she was not thin. And when you're caught up with abuse and a lot of stuff going on in your world, and then you start to have these body shaming feelings and all of the things, I would see her yo-yo diet. We would eat the most awful food. Now, I've shared about my paternal grandmother before on the show. My grandma was kind of a trailblazer, so to speak, mainly where I get a lot of my leadership qualities from. But she went out into the working world once all of her children graduated from high school. So I've only known her to work. I was the oldest in the family, and my earliest memories are my grandma always worked. And she worked at a company that was across the street, ironically, from their house. So my grandpa and I would walk to her, for lunch in the summers or whatever. And she was the boss. She was a manager within her business. And I always thought that was so cool. And people respected my grandparents so much. But my maternal grandmother, she was also a leader. Now, she had a completely different lifestyle, just so different. My grandmother had three children. One passed away at birth with the same man, but they were never married. He actually lived in France and would come to the United States. And when he would come, he basically would hook up with my grandma. She was fine with it. She would meet with him. She would do whatever with him that she needed to do. She would get pregnant and she would have his children, but he never provided for any of them. I remember my mom telling me that she didn't even meet him until she was a teenager. And I think it was like right before I was born, actually. Um, it it was just a different lifestyle. But my grandma, our small town, opened its first McDonald's when I was a kid. And my aunt and I are the same age. And my grandma would watch us until she couldn't because she decided to go to work and she became the team leader at this McDonald's. So back in the 70s, for these women to go out and do these things, it was pretty unheard of. And I share that because what I saw was these women becoming these big leaders in charge of a lot of responsibility. They actually held the families together on both sides, didn't like each other, but that's another story for another day. But I never saw them take care of themselves. And it trickled down to my dad and it trickled down to my mom. They didn't take care of themselves. My dad was different. My that side of my family is very athletic. He was an athlete. He's tall, he's thin. Even at 71 now, he still is very in shape for someone at 71, right? Um, so it was a different body style and everything from that side of my family. And my mom struggled with that, but neither of them had role models where people actually took care of themselves. So when I was 6 years old and I started to really understand how people in the world, yes, I was a weirdie, I'm a little nerd, and I had to mature very quickly because I had to take care of people always in my life. I learned that I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't want to be a classroom teacher, although those people were my heroes. I wanted to be a PE teacher. And I wanted to do that because I kept thinking, if my mom just could have known better, maybe she wouldn't have these yo-yo diets. Maybe she wouldn't constantly stand in front of the mirror and tell herself how fat she was. Maybe she wouldn't eat and eat and eat and eat and then make herself throw up or start taking diet pills, or even at one point started smoking cigarettes because someone told her if you smoke, it curbs your appetite, which I'm not a smoker, so I have no idea. And she thought she would try it because then if she stopped eating, she could lose weight. It was just this vicious cycle of these horrible, horrible acts she was doing to her body. And unfortunately, it started to trickle down to my sister and I, and even my brother as well. Now, my brother, he's in a whole different world. That's another story. But my sister and I both, we always believed that we were supposed to look like Olivia Newton-John. And we were supposed to look like the women on Knots Landing in Dallas and Bo Derek, who was popular at the time, and all these women that were put out there to be, quote, the perfect woman. And then we grew up in that era where you worked out the Jane Fonda videos and, jazzercise and all of the things. And I was an athlete. My sister, she was a bit as well. She was more in the swimming world off and on, but she didn't stay with sports through all of our high school years. I was a runner. I played basketball. I did softball. I did um, track and all of the things. So I was always in physical shape because it was important to me because it kept my body healthy. And in addition to that, I was always one that wanted to have better nutrition. Did I always? No. I look back on things now, especially working with these middle school girls, where I think, gosh, did I do stuff like that? And then I'm like, yep, I sure did. Um, there were years, of course, that I certainly wasn't healthy, but when I knew better, then I started to do better. And even going into becoming a young mother, it was hard at first to keep us on a healthy track because we did not have money. And being healthy, people, I don't know if people really understand it, but you can't really shop the perimeter of the grocery store when you have $20 to buy groceries for the week, right? Because the items on the perimeter are more expensive. And so we've gone through those hurdles. So health-wise, it's always been something that I've found to be very important. But this week, as we talk through this last strategy that I always use when I think about building our best life, it's more about just being healthy. It's about taking care of ourselves. And health is a piece of that for sure. But also stress management, rest. How do we deal with overwhelm? How do we deal with negative influences in our life? And I think that's where we have to think about this whole self-care thing as almost like a wheel, right? A circle that almost has like the wheel spokes in it, like a bicycle wheel, and every little sliver along that wheel is a component of this. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about since the pandemic, the rate of depression has increased so much. We're 5 years out. And this person was saying, some people still haven't gotten back to a place where they have the grit and perseverance to deal with challenging situations in their lives. They're already feeling isolated because they've become isolated, whether they did it out of necessity or if it was just a reason to stay more at home or whatever the backing is of it. We all know that it's true. And so now these rates of depression are going up. The rates of doctors prescribing medications are going up. The rates of the medications curbing the depression or the symptoms are not going up. And here we've got a lot of people dealing with a lot of mental health types of needs, and they don't know how to persevere on that. I mean, yes, I believe that social media has made everything in our face, right? News, we know about news immediately, where way back in the day, we didn't know all those things. But the number of people who have taken their own lives lately or have attempted to take their own lives and just the vast age span of that, it's not just an adult type of thing. I often wonder if we were better at taking care of ourselves, would we have these rates increasing like they are? Would we even see that people could almost be kinder to each other because we feel better about our own self and our own lives? Those are just theories that I have, but let's think about this. I went to pick up groceries before I started recording, and I was scrolling, my mindless scrolling time on social media. And I'm in a Facebook group of other school administrators. And this one in particular posted about how they were wondering if the rate of depression had increased once people had gone into school administration. Had people started to gain more weight once they went into school administration? And I was about to respond when my groceries came. So maybe it was divine intervention that I wasn't really supposed to respond. However, I was going to respond with this. When I became an assistant principal the first time, I was in a pretty good place. I was working with a friend, and although we were trying to make the school better, it wasn't necessarily a school improvement kind of place. But my second round of being an assistant principal, right before I took over that school, the school was in a lot of trouble. And I was placed there, me thinking they wanted me to leave. That's how bad the situation was. But actually, the opposite. They wanted to groom me so that I could be the person to take over. Because the principal that I was placed with was from the outside and was whack-a-doodle, like wild. It was a wild, wild ride. I didn't learn anything of what to do that year. I learned everything of what not to do that year. It was horrible. And it just so happened that my ex-husband started to notice, he's like, you're just not yourself. You're tired. You're exhausted. You're irritable. You're losing weight. You're not eating. What's going on here? This is not you. And it was that moment, that year, when I woke up early that January morning and said, I'm going to start running half marathons every year. And it put me back on a path of being more into my health and fitness and self-care because I had to. And I learned quickly that honestly, physical exercise is like free mental health. And that's what I wanted to post. Going into the assistant principalship actually put me back on a path of being healthier, being better with my stress levels, because I would go out with purpose. The first half of my run, I just ran to get rid of everything that was in my head. And the second half of my run coming back was purposefully designed to be able to take in fresh air, to take in the beauty of nature, to be able to think more positive thoughts, to give myself time for affirmations, to remind myself of how strong I was. Was it easy? Absolutely not. But it was designed intentionally for me to be able to do that. In my talk, once you hear it, because I'll link it, of course, hopefully next week when you get the show notes, I talk about we cannot keep going and pour from an empty cup. We cannot keep going and be expected to do big things in life, to have a great life, if we're constantly exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed, irritable, because nobody can be happy with that, right? And we can hear all the people we want say, you have to choose happiness. I believe that. You do have to choose. Life is all about choices, but your body, your life has to be in alignment with the choices that you make. I talked about schedule your self-care. Know when to say yes and know when to say no. Prioritize your life. These are all the things I teach to leaders, to women who want to make beautiful lives in their future, to people I mentor who are saying, I want to be really good at this, but I don't want to neglect my family. How do I find harmony in life? There's never going to be a balance because that's just impossible. We're humans and life is life. It's going to throw us the curveballs. But when you prioritize and you intentionally make sure that you are not neglecting any piece of your life, it can be better. Now, hear me say this when I say, even having a very set routine of I go out, leave the stress out on the road, come back, breathe in positive thoughts, eat healthy meals, everything in moderation, do the things. I've had years of weight gain. I've had years of weight loss. I've had years where I would say pretty happy with life. And I've had years where I've had challenges and I've had days where I want to get up and go, go, go. And I can't wait to get the day started. And then I have days where I go, maybe this is a day that I just stay in my pajamas all day. That's called life. So I don't want you to mistake any of these strategies for me saying these are only going to provide you with happiness every single day. And if you're not, then something's wrong with you or it means something, because that's not accurate at all. But it does help us get closer to having that life that we love. And if you've listened to me long enough by now, and if you're anywhere in the adult world, you know life is 50-50. You know, things are going to happen to us. We determine how we respond to it. It makes a big difference, but when we intentionally take care of ourselves, it does make everything else a whole lot better. So here's my big strategy for y'all this week. And this is honestly part of the workshop that's going to be going with this TED Talk and these speaking engagements. So y'all, you're getting some good free stuff this week on this episode. It's an activity that I did in a group coaching about a year ago. And I thought, wow, this is really profound. So I can't take all the credit for it. But I think it is something that is highly effective if you do it right. And that is to sit down with yourself and get out some paper. I'm a visual person. I like markers. I like the smelly markers. You can tell I'm a teacher at heart. But I like markers. I like colored gel pens. I write everything in my journal, in my calendar and pencil. But if I'm not in my calendar, I'm using all the different mediums, right? When I'm making my mind maps and doing all of the things. And I want you to draw yourself a large circle on that paper and divide it out with all the aspects of your life. You're going to have an aspect for your physical health, your nutrition, your sleep, your financial health, your social health, your emotional health, your mental health, your whatever pieces. You make as many or as few pieces as you think. But I think the more detailed you can get, the better. And write out what each part of your circle stands for. And then rate yourself and do it. Honestly, this is just for you. Nobody is asking you to turn this in. Nobody's grading you. Nobody's critiquing you. This is for you. But rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. And I promise you, none of us are a 10, right? But the more real you are and honest you are with yourself, the better this will perform for you. Rate yourself. And then review your ratings. And if you're somewhere at an 8 or higher in a section, you're probably doing pretty well. Do you need to improve? Possibly, but maybe your focus is better spent on those areas you rated a 7 or less. And specifically, if you have any that are 3 or below, really think about what adjustments in life do you need to make. And they could be big or small. It's not about trashing and throwing everything away. It could be little tweaks, but then do that work to actually make those changes. Brendan Burchard says a lot on any of the podcasts he's a guest on, how we have habits. And I've read all the books about habits, right? I'm a reader. Atomic Habits, blah, blah, blah habits, blah, blah, blah habits. But I do believe this: putting the right habits in place, being intentional with them, and making sure they're the needle movers are the ones that you really want to focus on. And then remind yourself that a habit doesn't happen overnight. I always told my teachers and my students it takes 21 days at least for something to become norm. And really to be a habit, I think it's more like a 6-week process, because then it becomes part of your regular world. But then sit down and make those action plans and focus on one area to start. Don't focus on everything. Don't think that you have to change everything in life. Focus on one area. But all of this is about your self-care. And when you start to have a routine and you schedule it out and you realize that you need to be well taken care of in order to keep pouring into other people, the whole mindset shifts. That's what happened for me. And I'll leave you with this. I was taught at a young age that I should be the hardest worker in the room. And I was for years. And I realized that being the hardest worker in the room didn't necessarily mean I had to do all of the work. And it didn't mean that I couldn't take a break. And those were some tough life lessons that I had to learn. And I always learned them when it was more of a big crisis. So take it from me, learn those lessons early. You do not have to be the one doing all the work. You do not have to be the one who never takes a break and doesn't put themselves as a priority. And you don't have to wait until crisis in your life happens to make you realize that. Take these steps now. All right, y'all, that's everything I have for you this week on Strong Inside and Out. And within this whole Building Your Best Life series, hopefully it's making an impact. Go back, listen again if you need to. You always have access to these as long as the podcast is alive, which hopefully is forever, right? And share it out with a friend because people need to hear this. I know they do. I know they do. I needed to hear this years ago. And it probably could have made a huge difference for me and the trajectory of so many people in my life. So have a great rest of the week. One more week for me until spring break. So keep cheering me on, and I will see you right back here next week on Strong Inside and Out.